She looked me up and down like I didn't belong. Her smile was fake, her tone sharp. "Try not to embarrass yourself," she whispered. Everyone at the table laughed, even him, my ex. But then the waiter walked up, looked straight at me, and said, "Your table, Senator." And just like that, the laughter stopped. She choked on her champagne. He dropped his gaze. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. My name is Isla Merrick. I'm 34 years old, a U.S. Senator, and someone most people in that engagement party never thought they'd hear about again, including my ex. A few years ago, I was just another woman with a broken heart and an apartment full of cardboard boxes. I had just left Mason Carver, the man I thought I'd marry. We were college sweethearts. I followed him to the city, helped him build his startup, stood by him when things went bad, and then I found out he had been cheating on me. Not once, not with one woman, with several. While I was busy helping him fix his life, he was out ruining mine. I moved out the same week I found the messages on his laptop. No screaming, no drama, just silence and a locked suitcase. He didn't fight for me. He didn't even try. I stayed away from everyone who knew us. I didn't want sympathy or gossip. I just wanted to rebuild. I started over with nothing, just a job at a local community office and a stack of bills. But working with real people, listening to their problems, solving them, that gave me something stronger than love. It gave me purpose. Fast forward 5 years, and I've gone from that little office to working on major policy. I helped pass bills that saved schools, supported families, and improved healthcare. I ran for state office and won. Quietly, steadily, I built a career that mattered, and I never once posted about it. No Instagram wins, no Twitter fights, just real work behind the scenes. I didn't want to be seen. I wanted to make a difference. The only person who kept me grounded through all this was my younger brother, Leo. He's 29, funny, protective, and the only one who still calls me Izzy. He knew how much Mason had hurt me and how hard I had worked to move past it. One morning, Leo walked into my kitchen holding a cream-colored envelope like it was a piece of trash. "You got mail," he said, tossing it on the table. It was an invitation, Mason and Aubrey's engagement party. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't even handwritten, just my name printed coldly under guest of honor. What a joke. Leo leaned over my shoulder. "You're not actually thinking of going, right?" "I wasn't," I said, "but now I kind of am." "Why?" he asked. "You don't owe them anything." He was right. I didn't owe Mason closure or Aubrey attention, but something inside me wanted to go, not to show off, not to prove anything, just to show up for me. "I want to see how it feels," I said, "to be in the same room and not feel less than." Leo smirked. "Well, wear something that shuts everyone up." I laughed, but deep down, I was nervous. The thought of facing them again made my stomach turn, but I reminded myself I wasn't the same woman who walked away years ago. I was stronger now, calmer, sharper. I wasn't the ex. I was Isla Merrick, a woman who built a new life, not out of spite, but out of strength. And so I circled the date on my calendar, August 12th. I was going to the party, not to make a scene, just to stand there with my head held high and let them see what they lost. The evening of the engagement party arrived faster than I expected. My hands were steady, but my stomach felt tight the moment I zipped up my dress. I chose a simple navy blue gown, clean lines, no flashy cuts, just elegant. The kind of outfit that didn't shout for attention, but demanded respect. My hair was pinned back, my makeup light. I didn't want to look like I was trying to prove something. I wanted to look like I had nothing left to prove. Leo picked me up, dressed in a charcoal suit with a crooked tie. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked as he started the car. "Not really," I said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." The venue was an upscale garden club in the heart of the city. Flowers, string lights, soft jazz in the background. Everyone looked polished and expensive. As we stepped through the gates, I felt their eyes. I knew most of them by face, if not by name. Old classmates, mutual friends, people who had known me only in connection to Mason. Some did double takes. Others whispered behind glasses of champagne. It didn't take long before someone approached with that fake surprise tone. "Isla, wow, I didn't expect to see you here," one woman said, eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Neither did I replied, smiling. "But here I am." I stayed close to Leo, who was already helping himself to shrimp cocktail and keeping a watchful eye on anyone who looked like they might say something slick. But I didn't need protection. I'd faced harder rooms than this. Still, I couldn't stop the tight feeling in my chest. I was trying to be calm, but every second made me feel like I was being watched, weighed, measured. And then I saw him. Mason. He was across the garden near the bar, laughing with a few friends. He looked almost the same, sharply dressed, confident posture, the same slight smirk I remembered. But when he turned and saw me, he froze. Just for a second. A flicker of recognition, surprise, and something else. Guilt, maybe? He gave me a small nod and then looked away. I didn't flinch. I kept my face still and neutral. I wasn't there for him. I was there for me. A few minutes later, she appeared. Aubrey. Blonde hair in perfect curls, a sparkling white dress far too close to a wedding gown, and that confident strut of someone who thought she already won. She made her way around the garden like it was her runway, and then she saw me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she gave me the kind of smile people give just before they throw a punch. She walked over slowly, holding a champagne flute in one hand, and leaned close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "Wow," she said, glancing at my dress. "Didn't expect you to show up. Brave of you." I stayed quiet. She tilted her head. "Try not to embarrass yourself tonight, okay?" Before I could say a word, a man nearby laughed, loud enough to echo. Others joined in. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Soft, but loud enough. A whisper built to humiliate. Even Mason cracked a smile. And, for a brief second, I felt that old burn of shame. But I didn't let it stay. I lifted my chin, looked her dead in the eyes, and said calmly, "Thanks for the reminder." I turned and walked away with Leo behind me. He leaned in and whispered, "She has no idea what's coming, does she?" I didn't answer, because the waiter was already making his way toward us, and everything was about to change. I stood near the fountain, breathing in slowly, letting the cool air touch my skin. The laughter behind me faded into background noise. I wasn't shaken. Not anymore. A few years ago, Aubrey's words might have crushed me. Now they just bounced off. She didn't know me. She knew an old version of me, someone soft-spoken, unsure, invisible. But that woman no longer existed. Leo returned with a glass of sparkling water and handed it to me with a look that said, "I'm proud of you." He didn't need to speak. He knew how hard this night was for me, and he also knew I wasn't leaving. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I nodded. "She's not worth it." "Exactly," he said. "You don't need to say a word. Let the night speak for itself." And it did. Dinner service was about to begin. Waiters began organizing guests by tables. They moved through the crowd with practiced professionalism, calling names and guiding people to their assigned seats. I watched as people followed, laughing, drinking, glancing my way, and then pretending not to. A young waiter in a black suit approached our corner. He held a small notepad and scanned it for a moment before lifting his eyes to me. "Your table is ready, Senator Merrick." Everything stopped. I didn't just hear it. I felt it. The clink of glasses, the low music, the whispers, all faded. Conversations froze. Heads turned. The word hung in the air like thunder. Senator. For a moment, it felt like the entire party turned toward me. Aubrey, mid-sip of her champagne, coughed hard, nearly choking. Someone behind her gasped. Mason looked like he had just been slapped. His eyes locked on mine, stunned and uncertain. "Senator?" Someone muttered nearby. "Did she say Senator Merrick?" Another whispered. Aubrey tried to recover, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. Her voice was quieter now. "Wait, you're a senator?" I looked at her calmly. "I am." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes darted to Mason, who avoided looking at either of us. That smug grin he wore all night was gone. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders stiff. Leo leaned toward me with a grin so wide it nearly split his face. "Oh, this is so much better than I imagined." I turned to the waiter and nodded. "Thank you. Please, lead the way." He walked ahead, and I followed, past people who had laughed at me just an hour ago, past old friends who had written me off, past Mason and Aubrey, who now stood like statues. I didn't rush. I didn't smirk. I didn't need to. My presence spoke louder than any insult ever could. The waiter led us to a table near the front, right beside the stage where speeches would be made later. Seated there were a handful of well-dressed guests, senior officials, community leaders, and one man I knew well, Senator Hartley, my mentor and one of the most respected voices in state government. He stood as I approached. "Isla, good to see you here. I didn't know you were connected to this crowd." I smiled warmly. "I wasn't, but I got an invitation." He chuckled. "Their luck." I sat down, finally at ease, surrounded not by shallow people from my past, but by colleagues who knew me for my work, my ideas, and my results. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. Back at the far table, Aubrey was still staring. Mason was looking down at his shoes. Leo nudged my arm. "You didn't have to raise your voice, just your name." I smiled, looked straight ahead, and said, "Exactly." I sat at the head table, surrounded by people who didn't need an explanation for who I was. They already knew. These were the kind of people I had worked alongside for years. People who had seen me speak at the state capitol, organize community town halls, and fight for the bills no one else wanted to touch. This wasn't a favor or a random placement. I belonged there. Senator Hartley leaned in with a quiet smile. "You know, when I first met you, I knew you'd go far. But watching you walk through that crowd just now," he chuckled softly, "that was a masterclass in silence." I smiled, touched by his words. I didn't plan for any of that to happen. I just came. "And that's why it worked," he said. "You didn't show up to prove anything. That's what makes it powerful." As salads were served and wine was poured, I noticed heads still turning toward me. People were whispering now, but the tone had shifted. No more smug comments, no more laughter, just curiosity, surprise, even admiration. I glanced toward the middle of the garden, where Mason and Aubrey sat. Aubrey hadn't touched her drink. Her shoulders were stiff, lips tight. She looked like someone who had just been told she lost a game she didn't even realize she was playing. Mason, on the other hand, couldn't stop glancing my way. Our eyes met briefly. I held his gaze without flinching. He looked away first. The speeches began soon after. Toasts from family, awkward jokes from old friends, compliments that sounded polished but hollow. Aubrey stood and gave a brief, overly rehearsed thank you speech. It was fine, charming in a surface-level way, but lacked depth. When she mentioned Mason's name, I noticed the way he stiffened beside her. He clapped politely, but his eyes found me again as she spoke. For a moment, it looked like regret. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was shame. Or maybe he finally realized that the woman he had once taken for granted had outgrown every part of him. There was no satisfaction in watching him squirm, just peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need revenge, because I had everything I ever wanted: self-respect, purpose, and a life that felt like mine. Toward the end of the evening, a few guests came over to say hello. One woman, dressed in a silver gown, leaned down and smiled. "Senator Merrick, I just wanted to say your work on that housing bill saved my brother's home. I never got to thank you properly." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. I reached for her hand. "You just did." Others followed. A retired teacher who recognized me from a school board hearing. A nurse who'd watched one of my interviews on healthcare funding. Not one of them mentioned Mason. Not one of them treated me like the ex. I was just Isla, Senator Isla Merrick. At that moment, I realized something that stunned me. I was grateful Mason had hurt me. If he hadn't, I never would have been forced to start over. I never would have dug deep, fought harder, or learned just how strong I was without him. Leo joined me again and whispered, "Well, you definitely didn't embarrass yourself." I laughed, finally relaxed. "No, I think I made it through just fine." He smirked. "They'll be talking about this night for a long time." And maybe they would. Not because I made a scene, not because I gave some fiery speech, but because I showed up, stood tall, and let my success speak for itself. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for them, but for me. I didn't need to look back anymore, because I had already arrived. The night ended slowly, as these kinds of events often do. Music winding down, laughter turning soft, guests quietly slipping out after hugs and polite goodbyes. I stayed a bit longer, not because I had to, but because I wanted to savor it. Not the awkward stares or the shifting gazes. I wanted to remember the calm, the feeling of sitting at a table where I was respected not for who I used to be, or who I was attached to, but for who I had become. Leo and I finally made our way to the car. The night air was cooler now, brushing against my skin like a soft reminder that the hard part was over. We didn't talk for the first few blocks, just silence, the kind that isn't heavy anymore, the kind that lets you think. "You were incredible," he said finally, glancing at me from the driver's seat. "I didn't even do anything." I replied with a quiet laugh. "Exactly," he said. "You didn't have to." That stayed with me. We stopped at a gas station on the way home, one of those little corner stores with blinking lights and a half-broken ice machine outside. While Leo filled the tank, I went inside and grabbed 2 bottles of water and a pack of sour candy we used to eat as kids. When I got back in the car, he looked at the candy and smiled. Now it's a celebration. As we drove back, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The heartbreak, the long nights working 2 jobs, the rejection letters from political offices, the campaign I ran with barely any money, knocking on doors myself, explaining who I was and what I stood for. None of it was easy. None of it was glamorous. But it was real. People often assume success looks like confidence and applause. But for me, it looked like survival. It looked like learning to sleep alone and not hate the silence. It looked like showing up every day, even when no one believed in me. It looked like losing everything, and then slowly, stubbornly, building it back, one decision at a time. And that night at the party, I finally understood something that had taken me years to learn. I didn't need closure from Mason. I didn't need validation from Aubrey. I didn't need a spotlight or a microphone. I just needed to live well, and to live honestly. Back home, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the couch. Leo flopped next to me, loosening his tie and tossing his jacket on the floor. I opened my notebook, the one I kept for personal reflections, and wrote just one line at the top of the page. "You don't have to shout to be heard," because I didn't. I didn't have to prove anything that night. I didn't have to make a speech or call anyone out. My presence did all the talking. My story, quiet, strong, and steady, spoke louder than revenge ever could. That was the real power. Not revenge, not pride, just peace. Peace in knowing I was no longer the girl crying in a half-empty apartment over a man who treated her like an option. I was a woman who held her ground, who earned her place, who turned pain into purpose. And what mattered most wasn't that I had a title. It wasn't the word senator or the table they finally gave me. It was that I had walked into a place where I was once broken, and I walked out whole. That's what they'll remember. Not what I wore, not the moment the waiter said my name, but the silence that followed. Because in that silence, something shifted, not just in them, in me. That's the thing people forget. Healing doesn't look like a grand ending. It looks like showing up, standing still, smiling when they expect you to cry, holding your head high when they try to drag you back down. I didn't embarrass myself. I reminded them who I was. And more importantly, I reminded myself.